mean, it's hard to describe the sensation, but it's sort of like feeling pins and needles over your entire body. But then your body moves and you can still feel it, but it's in another location that you're not in. Does that make any sense?
Very interesting. Do go on.
Maybe later. Hey, everybody, I'm back. Even though it's only been a few weeks for you, I've been bopping around alternate realities for what seems like an eternity. Probably because it was. Now that I've made my way back into my prime dimension, I'm going to take a little time to relax and learn a new skill. While I was away, the crew found the old laser sword, and I thought I might use it to do some light painting photos. Speaking of light painting, in this episode, we're going to talk with prolific light painter Russell Klimas about light painting, his process, and gear that you should have if you're looking to get into light painting yourself. All of that info after the break. So, how do I turn this thing on?
Maybe we shouldn't try this inside the ship. I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Yeah, listen to F 2.0. Live a little. Ah, there's the button. Hey there, listeners. Do you enjoy podcasts? Of course you do. You're listening to one. But who knows? Maybe you're listening to this podcast because you're being held hostage by an interdimensional being who only plays extremely niche content to their prisoners. But if you do like podcasts, you should check out the Good Pods app. Good Pods is an award-winning podcast app that is basically the social media for podcasts. You can see what podcasts your friends are listening to, directly recommend episodes to your friends, bookmark specific episodes to listen to later, and follow and chat with your favorite podcast hosts, as well as fans of shows you like. Another great aspect of Good Pods is that they have indie-only podcast charts. As an independent podcaster myself, I can't tell you how nice it is to see your podcast actually charting when you don't have to compete with giant podcast networks with big advertising budgets or who cross-promote on hundreds of different shows. So go download the Good Pods app, find and follow The Nerdy Photographer, and leave a rating on your favorite episodes. You don't have to leave a review. Just 5 stars will do the trick. Or, if you're feeling especially generous, you can leave a little something in our tip jar over on Good Pods. That's right. We have a tip jar. I got a tip for you. Don't take any wooden nickels. And go download the Good Pods app. What's up?
Well, I've got good news and I've got bad news.
Give me the bad news first.
Well, your website is incredibly slow and it's susceptible to being hacked.
I had a suspicion that was the case. What do you prescribe?
Use SiteGround as your website host. They offer fast, secure hosting for small and medium-sized websites, as well as managed WordPress hosting.
Can I pick up SiteGround at my local pharmacy?
No. You'll need to go to nerdyphotographer.com/recommends/SiteGround to find out more.
Thanks. So, what's the good news?
You have 6 months to live.
That's good news?
Better than a week.
Well, you've got me there, Doc. Hello, and welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I am your host, Casey Fatchett. I am here today with light painter Russell Klimas. Russell, welcome. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me, dude.
You're very, very welcome. And I gotta say that I was looking through your work and I was super impressed with kind of like, I consider it very sort of original in the sense that doesn't seem to be a lot of sort of made up things that are done, you know, in post-production, like just sort of like copying stuff and like recreating it. And also just like the designs and things that you create. So I was really curious, how did you get started in light painting?
So that's a great question because I don't really remember. There's a story that I tell myself and I'm like, this is what I think happened. So I had just gotten into photography. I think it was January 2017. And I was trying to, I had a bunch of friends who are fire performers. They do stuff like circus stuff and all that. So I'm like, okay, cool. I'm going to go on the Google and figure out how to shoot fire stuff. And I think it was within that I came across work of Eric Paré, and he does a lot of stuff with light painting tubes. And once I saw that, I was like, I don't know what this is, but I want to do it. And I've just been obsessed since then.
So there's a lot of trial and I mean, honestly, I am primarily self-taught from long ago, back in the ancient days of film photography. But it's like that, like beginning and sort of like getting a taste of something and then sort of diving into it and like, I'm going to figure this out and I'm going to like, it's going to be trial and error and whether we'll see what works. Is that's kind of how it went for you?
Yeah, that's pretty much how it goes all the time with light painting. It's like, yeah. And you just keep on going until you're happy with it. But then you're like, oh, what do I do? What if I do this thing? Or what if I do that thing?
Trying new things all the time.
Yep.
Well, that was kind of my next question was going to be, do the light paintings that I don't know, what is your process for creating something? Like, do you sort of like map it out just in your head? Do you draw it out? Do you sort of like, how do you workshop a new photo?
I mean, so for me, it kind of varies. Either I'll just be like farting around and like have an idea, or B, it'll just be in the moment. I find that happens a lot. Some of my best images just happen in the moment, and I'm like, all right, cool, let's just go with this. And whenever I do drone stuff, like last night, I was like, all right, cool, I'm gonna go do this thing, and then I didn't program it right, so I was like, well, I guess I just can't do it anymore.
Yeah, it's just it doesn't quite go the way that you expected. I was gonna ask if they always went the way that you sort of planned it out, but it's that sort of. I mean, yeah, I can't even begin to imagine the complexity, or maybe it isn't, of creating like the drone like light paintings. Like how much time do you spend like just setting that up? Like I was looking at the Critical Role one. I listened to Critical Role. So, I mean, I was looking at that on your website and I was like, oh, I wonder how long it takes to like set that up. I mean, cause I know you're just like, you're mapping it out, basically in sort of a flight pattern for the drone.
Yep. And it really kind of varies depending on the project. The Critical Role one was around 500 waypoints or so. So that took a good hour to 2 hours to plan out, and then having to go fly it. And like it almost never happens right the first time, so you have to try multiple takes. And it's not hard, there's just lots of steps.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that people don't like in light painting. I've done some with my wedding clients, and it's sort of those things where I tell people like, if this is something you want to do, like I will show it to them before the day of the wedding, like in our planning process. I'm like, if this is something you want to do, we can do this. However, it is going to take time. It is not going to be just like we're going to take, a bunch of pictures in like 2 minutes and then we're done. It's going to be like we need to take time. And, the first time, like you said, it's probably not going to come out. We might have to adjust and do things. So that's sort of like, getting people in the headspace of like trying to understand how long a period of time that might take to do.
Yeah, it's a freaking journey all the time.
My favorite, I think, is when people like say, well, let's get the sparklers and we're going to spell out a word or something in sparklers. I'm like, oh man, we get like just the day of it. I'm like, we need to coordinate so many things here trying to make this work. And you can do
amazing things with sparklers if you know how to plan it out and like really understand how you can manipulate the camera.
Right. And it's sort of like I usually have people say like, well, we'll have my bridesmaids, like they'll do this. I'm like, nope, we're going to have to train them how to do this. Like I can draw it out in the air, or my assistant can probably do it better than, because they got to think backwards. And like, if you're supposed to be spelling things out as opposed, that's usually the thing that where I'm like, no. We're going to step in here and we'll take over this and we can do it. But like, this is what we got to do, because spelling backwards is a whole other thing.
It sure is. And there's some light painting artists that like crush it. And I'm like, I don't know how you do this, but props to you.
Yeah, I can't write in cursive anymore. So it's hard enough to try to think like, okay, am I connecting these letters to one another? Are we just doing separate letters? It's a lot of thought that goes into it ahead of time, especially like when you're in a time crunch and something like that. Like I'm guessing that you don't have that sort of time crunch on the projects that you're working on.
Yeah, most of the time I don't. I generally will shoot between 2 to 3 hours a session, just because at the end of a session, at least in my experience, that's when you always get the best stuff. And, and it's fine, and I mean, most of my projects have always just been for me. So
that's all. What would you say is the most difficult or complex thing that you've attempted?
I would say probably the most difficult one was when I programmed the drone to basically make it okay. So I'll explain two things. So normally you can do like a stop motion animation with a drone. Okay. So that looks like, say I have a horse and it looks like the horse is running in place. So the thought was, okay, how do I push that one step further? Because that's how I always work, is by pushing an idea just one step further, seeing how that works, and then pushing it again. So then my thought was, what if I could have that thing that was static now literally move across the sky in the frame? So I took a GIF of Pikachu running, and I mapped out through doing overlays and stuff in Photoshop, and by determining how many pixels needed to be between each frame, then I programmed the drone to hit each part of that frame, and then I put it all together later.
Yeah, I saw that on your website, and I was like, okay, this is, I was going to ask you how you did it. Because I was just like, wow, this is really incredible. So you're animating that through like later on by creating different layers and then animating much like a regular animation.
Yeah, just like a stop motion animation. There's an easy trick to do it in Photoshop, just to put all the frames together.
Yeah, it's just like creating a timeline of stuff.
Yep.
So for the people who are out there who are interested in getting into light painting, it's something that I do occasionally, and I would love to do more of it. I think that one of the things that you've mentioned here, just in the is the simple time commitment for shoots that I need to be able to just knock out the time in my schedule to sit down and do some things. But I'm really interested in doing more. But I guess for people who are interested in getting into light painting, who haven't tried it at all before, what's the number one must-have piece of equipment apart from a camera that people should first be looking for if they're getting into light painting?
I mean, when it comes to any kind of it's very difficult to do light painting without a tripod, because you're doing a long exposure. You don't want the camera to move in most cases, so you need to be able to make sure that camera doesn't move. When it comes to if you just want to practice light painting and just try to play with it, your phone is a great source, and there you can download color flashlights on your phone, change the screen to different colors and give different effects. And then there's even a really cool Instagram trick that you can use to kind of make your own.
Awesome. I mean, I was looking at both at your website and seeing these sort of universal modifiers that you mentioned and things like that, just for using a flashlight to create different, to use along with different shapes and but yeah, obviously, you want to have something to stabilize your camera, whatever that camera is, whether it's your phone or whether it's a camera, a DSLR or mirrorless, something to keep that camera stable while you're taking the exposure. Because I've certainly made the mistake of trying to, not handheld, but using even just a monopod, and that's not going to work. It moves too much just with breathing, as still as you think you can be. And if you're doing really long exposures, I guess my piece of after the tripod would be getting a remote trigger of some kind would be my thoughts.
Yes, 100%, because most DSLRs can only do up to 30 seconds. Right. And then you have bulb mode, and if you're trying to hold down the trigger in bulb mode, well, one, you can't really paint because you're holding down the trigger, but two, there's going to be camera shake, and that can mess up and it won't be as clean as you might like. So I think a wireless trigger is highly recommended. And then if you were to have any tool, kind of like you mentioned before, just get a good flashlight. You can actually get a really decent flashlight for $35. Eric Pauret suggests a Volumov 18650, and it's for $35. You get 960 lumens. It has 5 different brightness modes, and it has a constant strobe mode, and can go 2 meters into water. Like, that's all you really need out of a flashlight. And for $35, that's a freaking baller deal.
And then you had like I said, you have like different things on your website, for like the universal modifiers to like create different shapes for your light painting, and like just I was looking through this and I was like, oh, it was like an eye opening thing for me to be like, oh yeah, like these are just like really. I love building things. I love like creating things for my lighting kit or whatever, like, because I'm like, oh, this doesn't exist. So seeing that, I was like, wow, I'm surprised I never heard of this before, because it's just something that I was like, seems like something that, you know, I would use a lot. So now I'm like, okay, how can I use this? But that was just something that it was like a light bulb, literally a light bulb moment, for me, seeing that gear and being like, oh yeah, this makes total sense now.
Yeah, most light painting tools are homemade. That's like just what we do. Light painting brushes obviously sells a bunch. There's other companies out there too. There's not a lot, but I've used light painting brushes more than any of them. So yeah, whether you're using acrylic blades or tubes or fiber optics, like there's a lot of different options that give you lots of different effects.
Awesome. So what advice do you have for anyone who's interested in getting into light painting?
So I would say the most important advice for something like that is having patience. And if you don't have it, you're going to learn it, because a lot of the time when you're getting into light painting and you don't know what you're doing, I find from when I've talked to other people is they're like, oh yeah, it was fun, but I didn't get anything useful out of it. Because just like with anything, right? It takes practice to get good at something. And light painting, in my opinion, is such a different art than traditional photography that you really have to start from the beginning again. And because you're not just taking a picture, you're making a picture.
Right. You're taking the time to, like, you have to think in like, I'm trying to think in almost a 3-dimensional space as opposed to 2-dimensional, because you're creating the painting itself. You're not only photographing the scene and figuring out all of the different settings that you have to work with in your exposure triangle of, like, you know, how am I going to keep everything in focus? How am I going to, you know, light my subject? What's my subject going to be? What am I creating with the light? How am I managing to paint without lighting myself up, or your assistant or whoever it is who's painting, you know, the scene? It's just so many aspects that go into it. And yeah, patience. I feel like when you tell people, like, yeah, this is going to take a long time to master this technique, and it's like a lot of people think like, oh, I'm just going to go out and I'm going to, like, I'd like to do some light painting stuff. I'm going to grab a couple things and, you know, I'm going to go out and take this great, amazing shot in, like, you know, half an hour, and I don't need to, like, sit down and spend the time to really master this craft. It's like you said, it's almost like it's a totally different section of photography, because you're just doing so many different things. It's literally the definition of photography is painting with light.
That it is, which I'm like, this is so appropriate.
Hey, Doc, thanks for seeing me.
No problem. I'm glad we got that whole other thing cleared up.
Yeah, I have to say, you scared me pretty bad when you told me I only had 6 months to live.
And you would have, in the Wild Wild West. But luckily, we have creams for that these days.
I appreciate it.
But I didn't ask you to come in to discuss life-saving salves and ointments.
What is it, Doc?
It's your WordPress website. It's old and outdated, and it needs a fresh new look.
I know, Doc. But I just don't have the money to pay a designer for a custom website.
You don't need to pay for a custom design when you use Flow Themes.
Flow Themes?
Yes, Flow Themes. They have a wide variety of WordPress themes for the modern creative. Not just photographers, but for videographers, florists, wedding planners, and much more.
But are they customizable to suit my needs?
Yes, every theme is totally customizable. Flow Themes has even launched a new line of Flex themes, which allows you to customize your website further than ever before while maintaining a cohesive, professional-looking theme.
Where can I get one, Doc?
Go to nerdyphotographer.com/recommends/flow themes to learn more and see what they have to offer.
Thanks, Doc. I really appreciate it.
Good. But now we're going to need to talk about what's wrong with your uvula.
My uvula? What is it?
It's a small teardrop-shaped piece of soft tissue that hangs down in the back of your throat, but that's not important right now.
Okay. I've got a bonus round of questions for you.
Sweet.
Best investment you've made in your photography business?
Oh boy, that's a loaded question for me, because mostly photography's just been for fun on my part. But I guess the thing I get most excited about is flashlights. Just like having really good flashlights, because then they just allow you to you just use them for so many different options that I find that they work really well. Other than that, like wireless triggers have been huge help for that, because I remember when I was just trying to use like an infrared remote when I just getting started, and that was the worst.
Line of sight is not.
Oh man.
It's not
so
good.
I found that wireless triggers were really, really helpful too.
What's your favorite wireless trigger to use?
I use the PowerSync 16 to 80. It's really durable. It can go up to like 700 feet. You can pair with other triggers. So if you want to capture the same amount of light exposure as somebody else, you can just put it to the same channel, and then one person triggers it. So it makes it really easy.
Awesome. All right. Next question. Worst photography related purchase that you've ever made?
Oh boy. So I'm trying to look around at all my light painting tools. I bought a lightsaber that I don't use very often.
Is that an actual?
That was expensive.
Was that from Disney, or like is that?
I just don't use it. Like, it's cool, but there's some parts of it that I would like different, or like the battery is awkward and makes it a pain in the butt. But so yeah, probably that, because I don't use it very much and it has issues.
All right. I have one final question for you, and then we do have a question from the audience. So what is your dream project to work on?
Oh, dream project. I'm really just like, do my dream projects. They might take time, but I have a lot of patience. Like, I think I have far too much patience for some people. But I guess right now, really, I just want to, if overall dream of what I want to do is, I just want to try to get light painting to be more mainstream. And however I can do that would be ideal. Like, I really enjoy like fashion and beauty photography. So if I could really make it more prominent in that, I think that would be the ideal world.
Sweet. All right. Hold on. We have a question from Margaret. Margaret, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Welcome.
Yeah. Hi.
Hello.
So I've just been mesmerized listening to you guys and scrolling through your Instagram, and it's so beautiful. I was wondering if when you create these very symmetrical patterns, do you draw everything out beforehand, or do you just play spontaneously with the sort of shapes and the light?
Most of the time it's spontaneously. If you give me an example, I'd be like, I can tell you, but I feel like most of them are always just off the top of my head. Like, if I'm doing like a crown or something like that, then, so what I will do if I want to make a crown evenly spread out is, what's really interesting when you're turning a light painting blade on and off is, as soon as you've turned it off, in your peripheral vision, you can see a ghost of where the light was. So that gives you an idea of where you've been. And then from there, not only does it help you rotate and create the crowns you're trying to make, but then really paying attention to the rotation of where your wrist is, and then how you can use the different segments of your arm in order to create different lengths within those crowns. And as long as you're paying attention to where that is and the distance of how long the blade is, you can pretty much make anything symmetrical.
Yeah, there's that.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask one more thing?
Sure, Margaret. Go ahead.
I was wondering about mixing colors. Does the light, the colors of the light blend, or do you get like two separate colors if you use two different lights?
Good question. So I'm trying to think if I have a good example of that. So I don't mix colors a whole lot, at least with blades. I like to generally keep it white. But if you were to mix the colors, I'm trying to think. So if you're using like fiber optics and you're going over the same spot, for example, a lot of the times because it's doing it all in one exposure, they are going to mix to a point, but you still might be able to tell a separation between them. It really depends on how long that you keep the color on the same exact spot. So if they're not in the same exact spot, then they're kind of just going to mesh, but you can still tell them distinctively apart from each other. So unless you were to really like be intentional on what you're doing, then it might not work. But now I really want to play with that idea, because you just gave me this idea of there's this photography trick where if you take a red light, a blue light, and a green light, and you all point them at the same point, it will become white, right? So what if we did the same thing with a blade, where we did the blade in the exact same spot with a red, green, and a blue to make it white? I don't know. It could work. I'm just having thoughts now.
Yeah, it's that sort of that gel photography, like little gel lighting things that we saw in like I've been seeing it a lot in the last few years. Trying it with, I'm curious too. I'm wondering how the length of time and the intensity. These are things for you to think about here, Russell. Like length of time and intensity of the light blending to create different colors. Create like where the overlaps, or like creating different color overlaps. Interesting. I'm really thinking about, I had a physics minor in college, so I'm really now thinking about like wavelengths and different things. Amazing. And one of the things you mentioned before about how like you can still see in the periphery of your vision that like burned in like into you, especially because you're doing it this in fairly dark situations, like using that sort of visual burn in your retina caused by the blade or whatever you're using as a signpost as to where to go from there is like really interesting. I've never really focused on that in particular. And when I've done it, that's a really good tip.
Yeah, and it looks like, as I'm trying to find more rainbow fiber optic stuff, that it looks like that they kind of just blend and kind of mesh. They don't really like overlap each other, at least when it comes to rainbows. That might change for other things, but I can't be certain.
Hey, I'm Dustin.
And I'm Steve.
And we host the Wedding Photo Hangover Podcast, a lighthearted look at the vast world of wedding photography.
That's what we're doing? I thought we were making a podcast about drinking beers, flying drones.
Did you even take yours out of the box?
Coping with your post-wedding hangover, social media etiquette, and wearing moon shoes.
They're not moon shoes, Steve. They're just...
But seriously, check us out if you want to have a laugh and learn a thing or two about shooting weddings and running a wedding photography business.
You can find the Wedding Photo Hangover Podcast on iTunes or wherever you get podcasts.
Hey there. Do you photograph people, families, couples, weddings? Are you tired of using the same boring, static poses over and over again? Try the Nerdy Photographer's Let's Be Real unposed photography prompts to get your subjects engaged with you and with each other. I developed these over 20 years and thousands of photo shoots. These prompts will help you capture dynamic, natural photos of your clients. And right now, you can save 25% on any of our prompt backs with the code POD25P. That's all uppercase, POD 25P. Stop posing and start prompting. Hey. And now for my favorite part of the show. What's that say? Useless information. This is always death. Our useless information for this is tryptophan, the amino acid that people generally think makes them fall asleep. Doesn't really make you sleepy after a big turkey dinner. Many other foods, including beef, pork, and cheese, contain similar or even higher amounts of this particular amino acid. So what do you think it is, Russell, that actually makes you fall asleep after a big turkey dinner?
I mean, if you're eating turkey, I don't know what's wrong with you, because I dislike turkey so much. But I suppose I'm assuming that because people over engorge themselves on the Thanksgiving, that their body's like, yo, we need to literally slow your roll because you're starting to get some right now because you're eating too much.
You're actually right.
And
it's the combination of both like alcohol and high levels of carbohydrates that slow your metabolism, and the actual weight of the meal forces your diaphragm to work harder to breathe. It actually makes you feel sleepy. So, Russell, I hope you found that bit of useless information fun and enjoyable. Tell people how they can find you, where they can find you on social media, on the web, so that they can follow your work after this episode.
Sure. So I am on the Instagram. You can find me at light, the letter N, and then LENSE. Or you can go to my website at light and lens, that's LENSE.com. And those are the two places I probably hang out the most. And Clubhouse. I'm on Clubhouse all the time because it's just a freaking party here, you know? So
that's how we met.
Right.
So do you pronounce that light and lensy?
No, I couldn't. I just spelled it wrong because sometimes people spell it that way, and I couldn't get the real one. So I was like, I'm just going to go for it.
That's awesome. Russell, I really want to thank you for being with me on the podcast. Welcome back. Many thanks to my guest, Russell Klimas, for being on the show. You can find Russell on his website, lightandlens.com. That's light and LENSE.com. Lightandlens.com. Or on Instagram at light N, the letter N, lens, LENSE. That's light N lens on Instagram. Did you enjoy this episode? Go leave us a review on Podchaser or Good Pods. Give some feedback on the types of episodes you'd like to hear in the future, too. Hey, that way we can give you what you want to hear. And tell your friends about the podcast so that they can learn and enjoy all of this nerdy goodness. You can also find us on social media at The Nerdy Photo on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Reddit. And if you'd like some sweet, sweet nerdy photographer swag, head over to our website and check out the merchandise, as well as other ways you can support the podcast, like buying me a drink. I need a drink every now and then. You can find all of that stuff over at nerdyphotographer.com. Just look for the support button. Anybody want to do some more light painting?
We should discuss your earlier attempts.
We can patch that hole in the hull, no problem. Until next time, everybody, stay safe and stay nerdy.
You better listen. Hey, this is Ken M.
Padawan J.
Coach Duffy from the Ocho Duro Parlay Hour podcast. Every week, the ODPH is talking sports, movies, TV, comics, and more. It's always a parlay of topics on each episode. You can find the ODPH on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, and wherever you find great podcasts, such as the one you're listening to right now. Don't forget to check out OchoDuroParlayHour.com, where you can find the links to all of the ODPH social media accounts, links to the bands whose music you hear each week on the show, hashtag 607 podcast info, and parlay points, our companion blog section of the show. Thanks for listening to the ODPH. Now get back to your regularly scheduled podcast.